Okay, part 3, into the other. But before I get to the other, I'd like to say a little bit more about self from last session. And referring to the self as psychologically, the self involves a person being able to empathize with another self or other selves. Philosophically, it involves a person perceiving his or her neighbor as another I or another self. Sociologically, the self looks to other individuals between groups, communities, nations, countries, as equal selves. And we're called to treat the others, or communities, or nations, or countries, the way we want to be treated, or expect to be treated. And so religion is an integral part of, and the history of, how the self interacts with other selves, reaching out to God. It starts here with myself and with others around myself. And that's why we have in Judaism, in Leviticus 19:18, the quote is, "Take no revenge and cherish no grudge against your fellow countrymen. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." Love your neighbor as yourself. Love yourself. Love all the other selves. Love your neighbor as yourself. Other world religion has something very similar, whether it's Confucianism or Hinduism or Buddhism or Taoism and so forth, world religion. We're saying much of the same thing. In ending this thing on self, I'd like to quote a rabbi who is dialoguing with his students or whatever. I just read this a couple weeks ago, but I like it. Says a rabbi quizzing his students, he asks, "How can we determine the hour of dawn when the night ends and the day begins?" Well, one of the students, day begins when from a distance you can distinguish between a dog and a cat. That's when dawn begins. No, says the rabbi. Another student asked and answered, "It is when you can distinguish between an apple tree and a grapevine." No. Well, then the student said, "Well, Rabbi, please tell us the answer." And he says to the student, "It is when you can look into the face of other human beings and you have enough light in you to recognize them as your brothers and sisters. Up until then, it is night and darkness is still with us." Self to the other selves. Self to the other self. Light, not darkness. Well, finally, there's the other self, or the other in capitals. And the other is the uncreated self, the infinite self, the mystery. He's not just one of these little created cells like you and I, but the other. My spiritual life, then, we're finally getting to it. My spiritual life does not just go deep inside myself and end. Nor my spiritual life does not just go outside myself to other creations or created pieces of the universe or cosmos or whatever. But my true self goes inside and outside, and I make some type of contact with the other. And the other is the uncreated, the infinite, the mystery of mysteries. We call it God. And each of us does this. Each of us does this in our own spiritual way, with our own peculiar history. I call that my spiritual life. My spiritual life has been started in a Catholic family 75 years ago. My spiritual life has been developed by going in the seminary many years ago. It'll be 50 next April, next year. My spirituality continues to develop as a retired priest. It continues to develop. It continues to be different. My spirituality is, I think, getting enriched since we have a new Pope. How about that? I'm excited, about the insight into this Pope and the new insights that I have during retirement. I'm not going to try to be a Benedictine. I'm not trying to be a Franciscan, even though we have a Jesuit Pope. I'm not trying to be these other people. It's my spiritual life. Francis was not a Franciscan. Francis was a deep person, self, who had a spiritual life, and other people got ideas from him or watched how he lived, the way he modeled good life. And they then became Franciscans. People. Saint Benedict was never a Benedictine. People looked to Benedict. Francis was never Franciscan. Ignatius was never a Jesuit. They became individuals who looked inside and looked outside and found meaning and found insight into their life and lived it to the full. And some of them did it very, very well. The key, you have your spiritual life. Look wherever you can look. Look outside, look inside. Take advice, question, think, pray, do it your way. I did it my way. Well, yeah. Francis did it his way. Ignatius did it his way. I think Teresa did it her way. Her way was God's way. Benedict's way was God's way. All those great people, all you great people, we all great people are created in the image and likeness of God. We try to find that in the best way possible. If you're sincere, if you're open, you take time, I guarantee you will have your own spirituality. I reflect some of these others, but your own spirituality. And you never get finished building that. You never get finished balancing that. You never get finished taking practical and making practical changes to that. It's an open-ended life process of trying to carry out what you think, what you believe, and what you think God is, who God is, what you are, who you are, and the community of all that stuff. My golly, we have a world rich in goodness. We have a world not so good. How does that fit in? Well, that's even harder to describe than each of us has a spiritual life. I hope these are helpful. I'm sure you didn't look at me all this time, and I don't blame you. I'm tired of looking at myself. Have a good day.